Welcome to the next meetup, and we are super grateful to be hosted again by Sentry. Let's give it a shout. I was actually just looking at the Sentry dashboard right like 2 hours before coming here. It's like very relevant, and I'm sure for many of you. Yeah, figured out why the errors was not showing up there. Um, as a campus. But yeah, super excited about tonight and to see all of you, to reconnect with all of you. And what we're doing here again is connecting different layers of the Ruby community. We have founders of startups, very ambitious companies. We have authors of open source, and we have engineers that work in big companies, small companies, and maybe they are thinking of building something themselves. So this is all, like a very nice kind of like diversity of different types of people that we have here, and also people that are maybe new to Ruby or just curious about Ruby. You're all very much welcome, of course, because we want to. Our goal is to grow this community and grow the ecosystem of Ruby and Ruby on Rails, maybe Ruby on Roda, and to prove that this ecosystem can be the best ecosystem for so many companies building today and building very precious products. Very ambitious products today. And some of the proofs, I'll just say a few words. So, Garrett, the president of Y Combinator, posted a very nice tweet giving a shout out to Rails. So, go check this out. Maybe share. It went super viral already, but by the way, this is the new homepage of our website. And of course, it's changing all the time, but I put there a few news that I think are important. So, what anybody remembers this company? It's also what was the Ruby on Rails digital commerce platform. They just became a unicorn, the newest Ruby on Rails unicorn. So they got investment at like $1.6 billion valuation. Again, founded by. I remember that this story is very close to me because I spoke with them when they were just getting started and they just migrated off of Next.js and TRPC framework into Ruby on Rails. So the story is incredibly dear to me. Now, Sixfold and Simple AI, you remember them from the SF Ruby conference. They raised substantial rounds. Sixfold raised 30 million, Simple raised 14 million, which is now called a seed round. But yeah, that's how it is, how it goes. But what's happening is we have a lot of like signals of very ambitious companies being very successful, growing really fast with the power of Ruby. And this is what we are celebrating tonight. And also another side of it is companies building incredible SDKs for Ruby. And they think this is incredibly important. You remember Temporal is focusing a lot on their Ruby SDK, and Sentry is also focusing a lot on building out the Ruby SDK, and we appreciate it a lot. And this is like super important for the community to have those first-party SDKs, not as an afterthought, really, but as a really something that this company is really focusing to perfect and make the best of their SDKs. So that's why I'm super excited to give the floor to Neil, a solutions engineer from Sentry, who will talk to us about their newest developments in that area. And we'll say hi to Neil.
The intro? All right. I hope to take no more than 5 minutes, but my name's Neil. I lead the solutions engineering team here at Sentry. Who here knows of Sentry or has used Sentry? Okay, great. You can pay like 80% attention. I'll explicitly flag what's new, but for those of you that haven't, as Irina explained, if you're an application developer and you need to know about your issues, whether they're errors, slowdowns, and such, we provide SDKs. Specifically, we have a really good Rails SDK that will give you that type of insight and help you act on this stuff. So rather than keep talking about this, I'm just going to show it. So here, real quick, what does Sentry do? You're a developer, your code breaks, it slows down. Sentry gives you the context. We threw this through errors, replays, logs, and traces, and we'll even throw this at our AI debugging agent, which we've labeled Seer, to automatically root cause this and optionally issue a pull request or send it to Cursor so that we can essentially self-heal. So this is our biggest investment lately. So, the 80% of the folks that kind of raise their hand, I would say if you're using Sentry, go ahead and check that out. But let me show you this in action. So here I have my application. It's just a React front end that's talking to a Rails backend, and I've already instrumented Sentry. So what does that look like? Here, all I have to do is go ahead and install our SDK. It looks like this on the front end, and then on the back end, it will look something like this. So pretty standard, install our library, initialize it, and you're all good to go. So let's go ahead and trigger some issues. First problem, this is slow. Why is it slow? I have no idea. Front end, back end, middle tier, databases, who knows what. More critically, when I try to purchase $1,000 worth of plants, it looks like things are broken. This is a P0. I need to deal with this now. I'm not accepting revenue. Whoever this user is that wants to buy expensive plants is super pissed off. So, there might go elsewhere. But in this case, here, I've already been alerted of these issues, and you'll see more just come in. And from here, I even have Sentry telling me what the problem is. So here it just came in, and it's saying this is actually due to something downstream. I'm going to take you guys on a journey, though. So, you're like, this is a Rails meetup. Why are you showing a bunch of JavaScript? We'll get out of that real soon. But here, we had an error that propagated to the front end. We have a bunch of context. We have all of the logs. But guess what? Seer is telling us the problem is within the backend, and I need to go there, and I can go ahead and even trigger a fix from within here. But as I mentioned, we're on a little bit of a journey. So within one click, I've traced this to the downstream error because everything is trace connected. And now you're like, finally, Neil is showing some Ruby. This is all Rails stuff. I can even see the stack trace. I can go directly into GitHub. I can then look at the variable values, see exactly what was going on. I see what the user was doing. Everything is typically masked by default. You can unmask it as well. We have all of the logs, front end, back end, and as we saw earlier, the whole entire trace. And let's see what Seer has to say about this. Oh, it's saying here's the root cause. And I can even toss it at my cursor agent or go further and find a solution and issue a PR within this platform as well. So that's how I'm going to get back to stable. All right, we're good there. But what about the product slowdown, right? So let's go back and jump in to here, what I call an opinionated view. So what I'm going to do is pull up backend insights page for my Rails backend. Here I get a quick snapshot of how things are doing. In this case, let's just say I have like a half hour to improve the performance of something. I'm going to start with queries. It looks like I have some highly frequented queries here where there's a lot of time spent. Within a click, I am presented the different endpoints and transactions that it's in. So here it's pointing right to the code within the controller. And from within here, I can pull up some samples, and it gives me right to the data set in question. So here is the DB query that I should probably optimize. It looks like I have some other errors. I even see the query right over here, and it's all trace connected. I can go into the profile if necessary as well. And if you truly kind of use the full power of Sentry and even leverage our new metrics offering, here I can see that, nothing was in my cart. And within a couple clicks, I can then dive down right into the relevant context. And here you can see it took 30 seconds to retrieve my product from the back end. Did it really impact the user? Yeah, because I can see they didn't wait 30 seconds and rage quit. But more or less, we want to provide you all of these answers. I hope this was less than 5 minutes. If you're not using Sentry, please use it on your personal projects. We have a generous free tier, and go ahead and recommend it to your boss. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Neil. I don't have to recommend it to my boss because we already use Sentry. So be more like me is what I'm saying. All right. Our next. Oh. All right. Our next speaker is Mr. Sohil Kshirsagar. Nailed the last name. So happy about that. Sohil is going to be talking to us about his company Tusk. You're a co-founder, I believe, at Tusk. Let me welcome Sohil to the stage.
Awesome. Thanks, Cameron. And thanks again, Sentry, for hosting us. This is incredible. And thank you all for being here, taking time out of your day. But yeah, my name's Sohil. I'm the CTO of Tusk. We're a YC-backed company, and we actually work on some form of observability as well as testing. And some of our customers include Postman and Samsara, along with a bunch of startups as well. But before that, I actually want to start with a story from my first job out of college. So it was my first full-time job. I was joining this company called Aspire, where it's a marketing B2B SaaS platform, and I was there to help with some of our external integrations, which was with Meta, TikTok, Pinterest, that sort of thing. The company was tracking social media data, like the likes and engagements over time. And these APIs change a bunch, sometimes without even notice from these companies. And so we coded defensively, where just because there was a missing field didn't mean that we wanted to throw an error in our data pipeline. And that makes sense. It ensured that we weren't having a bunch of errors in our data pipeline. But in my first few months there, we started getting reports from customers that they were missing their Instagram engagement data for the past month. And that was part of my responsibility. Now, I hadn't touched anything in the code yet, but there was a P0. They've spun up a war room, and this is my first job out of college. And I'm not even kidding when I was I thought I was gonna get fired. I was like, war room, holy. But yeah, it turns out this actually just happened from time to time. An API field changed from Meta or TikTok or Pinterest. Our old parsing logic returned null. And there was silent data loss for this entire platform. And there was actually no error or an exception, or we just had green dashboards. It was just data loss. And customers are asking, where is this data? And this was years ago, before coding agents. And but what I've realized is humans and agents kind of make the same sorts of mistakes, right? This isn't just related to data collection. It could be any external integration. And it's not really an LLM problem. It's more of a context problem. And it's a common failure mode actually that we see when we're looking at coding agents deployed at some of our customers. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about guardrails versus a harness. And so guardrails has become a very popular term. I think OpenAI just released their Guardrails SDK. And when you look into what companies talk about when they mention guardrails for coding agents, it's really about sandboxing and input-output limitations. What should an LLM say, or what is it not allowed to say, right? You have your linters, your CI, your tests. And I didn't know a lot about horses and blinders, but I learned about it for this talk. But basically, these blinders for the horse are so that they don't have peripheral vision, and so they stay on track, right? They're not going to get distracted by something shiny over there or walk into a hole on the other side of the road. And so when people talk about guardrails, I actually think of them more as blinders, right? They're there to make sure your agent doesn't make any catastrophic mistakes. But what you really want to improve your coding agents is you want a better harness, right? Your harness allows you to guide the horse. It allows you to guide the agent. It gives it context on what it's supposed to do. It allows you to see more than just what's directly ahead of you, and allows you to better steer your coding agent. And so when we think about improving coding agents, I really like to think about it as how do you improve the harness, right? These LLMs, as of months ago, have become really, really good, but they still make the sorts of mistakes that we're why did this happen? Or they still cause bugs. They still cause regressions. And right now you can have 10 parallel agents working on 10 different features, and it gets you 80% of the way there. And then now you, the engineer, are stuck having to figure out the last 20%. And that last 20% is always the hardest 20%. And so, we're not seeing the productivity gains that, maybe management or other people are expecting from us. And it seems oh, look, this agent just built out this whole platform by itself. Why can't we do that right now for this feature, right? And it's usually because the agent didn't have a good harness. And so I'm going to boil this down to 3 questions that you can ask when you're looking at your coding agents personally or at work, and see how you can better improve them. So the first question is, does the agent have enough context to make a great plan? Right? Good plan leads to good output. Great plan leads to great output. And I think most people have now started using coding agents in a way where they spend a lot of time on the plan, right? If the plan seems good, you're likely to get good code. And actually, the tweet by Gary Tan kind of exemplifies this, right? Like Rails has a huge head start here because of all the conventions as part of the language, right? You have your schemas file, you have your routes file. There's no wasted tokens or ambiguity about where should this model go, where should this controller go. And I actually, really do think that more companies are going to start using Rails in order to allow their agent to waste less time and less thinking on the actual syntactic piece of what it needs to do. But that's all static context, right? It tells you what the system looks like, but not actually how the system behaves, right? Your schema says that this database column is a string, but it doesn't tell you what those values actually look like, right? And so I think one really useful thing that you can do here to give your agents better context is give them read-only access to the database, right? Your local database, your dev database if you can. If you can do your production database while doing PII masking and making sure there's no sensitive data, do that as well, right? Because if the agent can fully understand the system and all the data that's flowing through it, it's going to come up with a much better plan. It's going to think about better edge cases when it's doing its planning. But yeah, let's move on to the second question. Does the agent know how to confirm that its changes work? And the easiest example here is just like net new tests, right? Like agent writes some new tests. It proves that at least that new function that it wrote works according to that test. But you can go further than this, and you want to make sure you have short feedback loops for it. So actually, the Rails console works really well for this. It allows you to query databases, run functions, check the output, iterate on it. And I actually recommend really leaning into functional programming here, because if your agent can just call the function and then get the output and doesn't have to worry about dependency injection, it actually allows it to iterate a lot faster on that. Yeah, and again, I also think that, if you're working on, like, for example, if you're working on some sort of analytics query, right? It's not actually writing anything to the database. Actually have the agent test that analytics function or whatever you wrote against the dev database or against your staging database, right? Like, give it the opportunity to find some of the edge cases and issues before you actually have to go test it and find it yourself. Basically, like, the more ways your agent can verify its output, the better the output's going to be. And so that's definitely a key part of the harness that I think sometimes we miss. And the final piece is, does the agent know it's not causing regressions, or do you know it's not causing regressions, right? And good unit testing, I think this just boils down to really good testing. Good unit tests give you the definition of how your system should behave. If you don't have that definition, the agent doesn't know when it breaks things. That's pretty obvious. And for those of you who have always been, pushing forward testing, like, that's becoming even more important. Just like a quick side note, I like to think when you onboard coding agents to your code base, it's how would you structure your code base if you knew that you were going to onboard 100 junior engineers like in a day, right? Like, if you reframe the problem like that, you're going to have a ton of testing, you're going to have a ton of guardrails and make sure it doesn't make those sorts of mistakes. So sometimes it's helpful to think about that, because ultimately coding agents are incredibly smart, but at the same time, they just don't have the context that we do. And so they'll make dumb mistakes. One more thing relating to unit tests is, sometimes we work in code bases that don't have great unit test coverage, and you know that you're going to be working on a new feature that doesn't have good unit test coverage. I highly recommend that you backfill those unit tests before you even start on that feature. That really helps a lot and gives the agent a definition of how your system should behave. And you also obviously need API tests, end-to-end tests for some of these critical paths. But fundamentally, a lot of these tests are somewhat contrived in that they're not actually how real users use your application, right? Whether it's an agent writing them or a human writing them, you're kind of thinking about like the classic ways that this API or this function could get called. But we all know users find ways to use our applications in ways that we would have never even dreamed of. And so that's where I think that we need to be testing more against real traffic, not just these written assertions by agents or humans. But yeah, I guess to summarize, these three questions helped me when I was thinking about how to improve the agent for our own code base, and we've talked to our customers about it, and we kind of reframe it from this. And so I do encourage you to really think about these three questions and whether the coding agents and the tools you're giving it are actually able to solve all three of these. But yeah, so what am I actually working on? So we've been thinking a lot about how to make coding agents more effective, and kind of relating to a lot of these questions, we've been working on Tusk Drift over the last 6 months. And the idea here is we're taking your real user traffic and turning it into unit and API tests. So we're capturing user traffic on dev, staging, or prod, and our SDK allows us to replay these API requests idempotently and deterministically. So the goal here is that when you make a change, we can replay those tests, if there's any sort of regression, we're going to report that to you. Sometimes it's an intended regression, right? In the sense that I actually did mean to make that change, but sometimes it's not. And so we're going to give you both of those, give you analysis on what we think it is. But the other part relating to the first point that I had about the context you're giving to the agent, this same traffic can actually be really valuable context for your agent when it's making plans or making coding changes. Instead of just your agent looking at the API and trying to figure out what could these requests and responses be, it's actually going to be able to query our backend and say like, hey, can you give me examples of this API? Like, what does this actually look like on dev or prod? And so, yeah, our goal here is to like kind of help all three of those questions, right? We help with better context to plan. That context can also be used to write better unit tests to verify. And then finally, like, we're going to help prevent more regressions as well. And now here's where I have to do, a fair warning is that this demo is in Python. We don't have Rails yet, but Rails is next. Rails is next. And it's part of why I'm here is because I would love to get feedback and see what you all think about this and whether you think this is going to be useful for you all. All right, let's go into a demo. So I'm going to be showing a simple Python repo that has a weather service that you call it. It figures out your location, tells you what temperature it is where you are, and maybe a recommended activity. There's also some other sample endpoints like creating a post, creating comments, things like that. And so I've already installed the Tusk SDK in this application. We've already run it when there's real user traffic. And so we've actually already recorded some traces. So we can go in and say, let's do Tusk list, and let's get some of these traces. And so in here, what you're going to see is you're going to see these different traces. You can drill down into what are the actual child spans that are included in it. And the key thing here is that you actually are also seeing the request and response bodies here, right? And so what this allows us to do is then actually allows us to deterministically replay these traces as well. And to clarify, we don't just do HTTP calls, we also do database, Redis, things like that as well. And so, we're on the main branch. I'm going to run this, and I'm not going to expect any actual issues here because this is what we recorded it on. So we ran it, and what this is doing now is it's starting your service, it's starting it in replay mode, and then it's making these HTTP requests to your service. And when our SDK sees an outbound request, we're actually intercepting it and providing the recorded response that we had. And so you can see here, like for this example, we were actually looking through, and this is the weather request, and we found some mocks, and we replayed it, and everything looks great. There's no issues here. But if we were to check out a buggy branch, and let's take a look at how this differs from the main branch. And so in this buggy branch, we found that the thousands of users that are using this service are primarily based in the US. And so we want to report weather in Fahrenheit, not Celsius. So we decided to add a function, convert Celsius to Fahrenheit, and we're actually going to convert Celsius to Fahrenheit here, then return it. There's also another smaller change just to show something else. We were refactoring some of our APIs, and we actually forgot to replace the comments with the actual comments. So there's a couple changes here. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to run the same exact test suite, but on this new branch. So we're going to run that. So yeah, so actually what we're going to see is we're going to see some deviations, right? So this is the weather-based endpoint that we saw. So now that we've converted it from Celsius to Fahrenheit, we are accurately seeing that the temperature is actually 61 degrees. So great, that works. But now our weather-based activity is saying too hot, stay indoors. And the reason for this is we didn't actually update some constants that we're assuming that it was going to be in Celsius. And let's look at this other deviation. So this is the one, if you remember, this is the one where we refactored the API and we removed comments. And you'll see here, like this API doesn't return comments anymore. And so the goal here is really that if you run these tests on your PRs, we're actually going to help you be able to catch these regressions. If you're using our cloud product, we actually do classify these as well. This is a bit verbose for humans to look at, but AI agents actually do a really good job of analyzing this sort of information. But this is all happening after we've made our code changes. Ideally, we can prevent this from even happening in the first place. And so that's where I kind of mentioned this earlier, but all this trace data that we have is super valuable for coding agents. And we actually expose it to coding agents using an MCP. And so if you go here, you can see, I did this previously, but I told Claude for our weather API, I'm not sure if it's Fahrenheit or Celsius, but change code to the temperature unit. It's currently not. And it explored the code base. It actually called our MCP and it confirmed the current unit. the API returns Celsius, and it's confirmed by real traffic showing temperature, right? And so obviously these are contrived examples, but because we're deterministically recording and replaying these APIs, it actually scales with however complex your application becomes. And in terms of this data that we're providing to agents, it gives it the context of like, how does the data flow through your system, and allows it to create really good plans. And, you know, it's not to say this is like replacing Sentry, like they're very complementary tools, right? Sentry is telling you about all these sorts of errors and statistically aggregating all these things. And what we're trying to do is give you maybe like, hey, what do these requests and responses look like, right? Like what's the sort of data flowing through my application? But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I had. Let me double check. Yeah, that's all I had. But yeah, basically, you know, again, we have Python and Node. We don't have Rails yet, but that is next, I promise. And so if you're interested, and we're looking for early users as well. So if anyone's interested in wanting to use it and be an early user, come find me after. And yeah, I don't know how much time I have, but if we have some time, I can take some questions as well. And if you're shy, you can find me one-on-one. Oh, perfect.
So how does it hook up to the CI/CD pipelines?
Yeah, so the question was, how does it hook up to CI/CD pipelines? And so what you're going to do there is like those same CLI commands, you're just going to run them in your CI. You're going to set up a CI workflow that's going to do Tusk run. When you're hooking up to our cloud, those traces are actually being exported to our backend. So it's going to fetch it from our backend, run those in your CI. It's going to report the results back to our backend, and we're actually going to then do the analysis and show it to you. I could probably find an example pull request as well. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, I can find one later and show it to you. Sorry.
So let's say you were to like change the field name from temperature to temp. Let's say you were to change the field name from temperature to temp. Would that break all of your recording data? And do you try to update the existing recordings, or do you just throw them out and record new traffic?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, yeah, that would break the recording data. And ideally, we would have shown it to you in your PR that you are doing this breaking change as well. And so then those tests get removed from the suite. But because our SDK is automatically recording, the idea is that it's going to refill those tests essentially as people are using those new endpoints. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Wait, I have one last question for you. Okay, so really quick. Irina showed how Gary Tan was talking about how Ruby and the fact that it's, sort of, Rails, of course, has all these conventions that it's following. It makes, Ruby and Rails code more easy for LLMs to generate. I was reflecting watching your talk about how, like, the Rails and Ruby communities are also like big on testing. And I'm wondering, like, if you think that that is also maybe a little bit of a competitive edge in the Ruby world. I don't know if that, because I think in the other language communities that I've seen, like testing is not as big a thing, right? And so like, is Ruby potentially like got a little bit of an edge there, do you think, or not?
Yeah, I really do think so. I mean, like if you actually are effectively able to use coding agents, that 2-3x's potentially your engineering output. And, given that Rails and Ruby does support testing really well and the community is really good on testing, it feels like you're going to have better harnesses for your coding agents, and your coding agents are going to be better. You're going to have less regressions. And especially as, creating software is becoming cheaper in a sense, right? Like getting something out there is becoming cheaper. And so the competitive edge that you're going to have as a company is, does your software work well? Does it not have issues, right? And so I think anything that helps your software do that is going to help you in the long run.
You mentioned masking.
Yeah.
Where does that config live? And like, can you talk that through?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so you can set up PII masking rules. And so basically you can say like these endpoints or these fields, I just never want to record, or I want to redact them to this thing. Like, so that sort of stuff, it's like basically a YAML config that you can do that. To be fair, a lot of customers start off using us on dev because their dev environment actually gets quite a bit of traffic, especially if you get to a decent size. You have product managers, sales folks, all sorts of folks using it. And so for companies that are particularly sensitive, they tend to stay on there. And companies that aren't as worried about it, then they use the PII masking rules.
Another round of posting.
All right, our next talk is Mr. Mike Dalton. And Mike is going to be talking about turning images into calendar events. Mike's a long-time attendee, first-time speaker, I believe. Give it up for Mike Dalton.
Okay. This is legit here.
Yes.
Oh, so I don't have to like. Oh, wow. Okay.
Have a a second system. When something's if you need something to be reliable, you need two systems, right? Running in parallel. So we have two mics, two cameras. See? Professionals.
If I share, if I'm using
Mm.
keynote,
So, folks, remember after this talk, we'll go into the break. So you'll be able to talk to both of them, to all of them, all of our three speakers that presented before the break. And after the break, this is important, very important. After the break, we have the open mic. So the open mic is for all of you to take the mic and do any announcement or share a question, share a story, do whatever you want. So this is for you to tell what you're up to, what you're building, what you've tried recently, anything. Think about this. Yeah, you gotta come. So we usually have whatever, like 10 people, you should come. That's what I'm trying to say. Come on stage, grab the mic. Yeah, especially if you are wearing a WAP t-shirt. Not a coincidence, I guess. Not a coincidence. Makes sense. So I have no idea why, by the way. But yeah, so that's the open mic. That's for all of you. But yeah, during the break, of course, let's connect. Let's meet new people, make new friends, and tell everybody what you're up to. What you're doing.
Cameron tells a joke. Oh wait, no.
oh, wow. I'm
Good.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I was a little worried about looking down here because I can't really see much here, but you've got this giant TV right up here.
Right.
This is awesome.
That's
Yeah, I mean, I've got a lot of different options. All right, now I just gotta figure out how to. Okay, cool. Yeah. Hi, my name is Mike Dalton. I actually haven't been to this meetup before. I'm from Philadelphia. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you. Probably anybody else from further than Philadelphia here tonight? They always ask that at conferences, and I've never been the furthest.
I was just in Portugal.
Oh, I mean, okay. Thank you for stealing my thunder.
I was in Hong Kong.
Okay. So I'm at least third. I'm in third place at least. Okay. Yeah. So this is my talk. Make sure I stay here. Building an LLM powered mobile app using Hotwire Native. And yeah, that's my picture right up there. I throw that up there because that's what I use on all of my social media. So in case you've ever seen that picture online and wondered who that is, this is me right here. So I live in Philadelphia. My day job is at a company called Triumph. We're sort of probably the fourth most known Triumph. There is a Triumph motorcycle. We're not that Triumph. There is Triumph.com, which is a lingerie brand. We are not that Triumph. We're Triumph.0. And I think there is a Triumph like gambling app or something I've seen recently. So we are Triumph, the trucking provider of trucking automation software. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about my night job building my own apps. This is just a quick segue. Coming from Philadelphia, I'm sure you're all disillusioned to it by now, seeing these advertisements like everywhere. But this is like hilarious to me that there's a bus with the phrase "Who's your daddy" on it, because in Philadelphia, this is what we're stuck with in Philadelphia. I don't know if you know this guy, John Morgan. He's like a big, rich lawyer, and his face is plastered all over Philadelphia. We also have Mayo Adrian, I don't know if you know the Rocky reference, and Wawa. Has anybody been to a Wawa before? Okay, yeah. So you guys know about Wawa. All right, okay, that's enough about that though. Now I'm going to talk about calendar vision. This is an app I've been working on, and it solves a problem that I have, which is I like to walk around a lot. I live in Philadelphia City. I go to the theater, go to see concerts, and I'm always like getting these mailers and seeing these flyers with events on them. And I just find it such a huge pain to add it to my calendar. I don't know why. I don't like typing all that shit in. So what I've done is built an app that will allow you to take a picture of a flyer, a screenshot, anything like that, and it'll add it to your calendar. So here's an example here. I was walking around Philly a couple weeks ago, saw this post. I don't know why I'm looking over there. I got this thing right in front of me. I see this flyer has kind of an interesting event on it. Actually, this is a side note. This is a typewriter shop, like an old-fashioned typewriter shop. But at night they hold like concerts and comedy events, like in this really small typewriter shop. It's pretty interesting. So I've wanted to get this event on my calendar. And if I open up the iOS Photos app, they almost get this. They almost sort of make my app useless, but they don't quite get there, because if you take a photo of this and you click that little, it's like a square button with a bunch of lines on it, that will show you some text they've like extracted from the image. And it will give you some suggestions. Like for this one actually does a decent job. It figures out the date, it figures out the time, and it figures out the location. But it doesn't populate the name of the event, even though that's pretty obvious. And it doesn't say that it's going to repeat every Friday. And that's what, if you didn't see, that's what it says here, every Friday. So this is calendar vision. The way there's a couple different ways it works, but you can take a picture of something. You can open up the share menu, click on it. That'll add it to calendar vision. And as you can see on the right-hand side, it extracts like all the relevant information, the name, the location, the date and time, and also the fact that it repeats every Friday. Yeah, so I'm going to talk get into the code a little bit about how I built this. I'm using something called Hotwire Native, which probably this audience is familiar with, part of Hotwire. So it's an alternative to native iOS, Kotlin, and React Native. And the good part about it is you can reuse most of your Rails app with it. And the way it works is out of the box, you get native navigation. So the navigation kind of feels like a native app, but all the views are pretty much your Rails views. So, you'll probably get it working, and then you'll probably realize that, okay, I need to change some things to kind of make it look and feel like a native app. So I'm just going to go over a couple examples of things I've worked on. So this is something I've recently built. I've wanted to be able to offer the user multiple calendars and switch between them. So this is how it looks like on the web. You've got this little button here that opens a dialog box, and in it you can choose which calendar to switch to. And then this is what it looks like on the iOS app. And as you can probably tell, this just doesn't really look like a native. This doesn't really look like an iOS app. It's got this dialog window, and that's just not really something you typically see in an iOS app. So what you can do is you can, with some configuration, change it so that the dialog opens in a modal. And what we're going to do, I'm going to go through some of the code here for that. This is the web implementation. It's pretty straightforward. We've got a button here. When we click on the button, it sends a turbo stream request, which then replaces this just like global div dialog container with a window, and then you can use JavaScript to close it. That we need to do a little bit more to get, but just a little bit more to get the modal working in natively. So we don't use a turbo stream request. Instead, we are going to use this thing on the bottom left-hand corner, the configurations controller. This is something that Hotwire Native provides to allow you to change what the navigation looks like. So in this case, we're going to say instead of the default navigation, we're going to use a modal for this. And we're not going to do a turbo stream request since that is what would show the dialog. Instead, we're just going to render the page as normal, and then it's going to appear in the modal. Some features are pretty simple to implement. Some require a lot more native code. So for example, this is the window I think I showed earlier to add a calendar to the app. So this is that's a fully native window there. And so we need to have a way to integrate with that. And so at this point, you need to kind of jump into Swift or Kotlin code and add a little bit there. So what Hotwire Native provides is a way to specify that certain URLs are loaded with a native component instead of the web component. So what's happening here is this is sort of Hotwire Native intercepting the URL, not actually loading the page, but instead allowing you to do something like in pure native Swift code. And so what's going on here is when the user visits that URL, instead of actually trying to present that page in the web view, this code's going to get executed. And what this is doing is, there's kind of a lot of code here, but what this is doing is using this EK event library within Swift and triggering that native window to open and allow the user to save it directly to their calendar. And then we've got, this is another component here to dismiss the event. So all in all, like probably maybe like 100 lines of Swift code are needed for this. But the good news is you don't need to know Swift anymore because you can just ask Claude Code to write your Swift code. And that is, I would say most of my Swift and Kotlin code is, is written by Claude or Cursor or one of those. And then this is, in order to, skip this part, you have to use the configuration again. This just tells if the app encounters this URL pattern, you're going to use this add to calendar native component. And then this is what the link looks. Okay, so now we're going to get into a little bit of the LLM stuff that I'm doing. So how advanced is it to get these events extracted from the pictures? And the answer is that it's really not that advanced. That's the part I've spent the least amount of time on. It turns out that these LLMs are really good at looking at a picture, and if you just ask it what events are in it, it'll do a pretty decent job of that. So what I'm doing here, users can upload an image. I'll prompt the LLM with that image, and then I'll provide it with a schema and say here's the exact format, because I don't really want plain text. This isn't really like a conversational kind of app. I want structured data back from the LLM, because then I'm going to store that in my database, and add it to their calendar. So I'm using Ruby LLM for that. There's not much configuration needed. This is the code that I need to call. There's not much going on here. The prompt is really simple. If you've got prompt tips for me, that's probably the area I've spent the least amount of time on, just because it's mostly worked with the admittedly very basic prompts I've used. So if you've got tips for me there, that would be awesome. So that's all. This is pretty simple. The one thing to look at is the with schema, and that's what we're going to look at next. So the schema, if you've used OpenAI or any of the tools, they allow you to specify to give it a JSON schema, and then they will, promise that they're going to give you a response in this JSON format. And so, like I said, the descriptions here are pretty simple. I'm just asking it for an event name, event location, description. Some of these are a little more complex. I just truncated it for being able to fit it on the slide. And then, yeah, probably the part I've had the most issues with is recurring events. I haven't quite convinced OpenAI what it means for an event to be recurring, because sometimes it thinks that like if a event happens like, you know, like a couple days in a row, like it gets confused about whether that's just like a 2-day long event or is it recurring daily. So I've probably spent the most time trying to get it to give me the correct format for recurring events. And then, yeah, so, and then this is what OpenAI gives me back for this particular image. Yeah, and then I also am doing this with websites. So users can provide a URL of a website. We'll take a screenshot with Selenium, and then we'll send that off to OpenAI. And yeah, this is what the screenshot code looks like here. It's pretty straightforward. I have had to do some things where a lot of websites don't like you to send bots there, so they'll like put up, or they'll just put up annoying dialogues and modals there. So I've have all this code to kind of just wait a certain amount of time and close the modal. But other than that, it's been pretty simple. And yeah, this is the prompt I'm sending there. This is an image of a web page. What events are described in this image? And I have to put today's date. That sometimes otherwise it gets confused and tries to like give me an old date back. And yeah, so this is what the data looks like there. I did experiment a couple times with using LLMs that allow you to give it a URL, and then it will explore that page on its own. But it just wasn't as good as just giving it the image. Just giving it the image, it was better at actually figuring out what the events are, which I found kind of interesting. And then the last thing here, email. So like users can, you know, if they get like a list of concerts in their email inbox, they can forward that to the app, and then using like Action Postmark and Action Mailbox, we'll receive that, and then we'll take a screenshot of the email. And because I also found that was a lot better than just grabbing the text of the email and sending it, because a lot of emails are also just images. So taking a screenshot of that worked best as well. And this is the code for that. This actually was kind of an interesting problem. I wasn't quite sure how to take a screenshot of an email programmatically, and Googling for like screenshot of email is not at all what I was looking for. So if anybody knows a better way, let me know. Like, because what I'm doing here is I'm essentially like I'm like sort of loading it inside of my web app, like on a private page, and then just taking a picture, having Selenium navigate to that page, taking a picture of it, which works really well. It just feels like there's probably a better way to do that. And yeah, and like this is the code for that. Pretty simple. Just telling OpenAI that this is an image of an email. And then yeah, this is what I get back for this one. So the calendar vision also handles pretty well multiple events on an image. And yeah, so what's next? Getting more people to use it. It turns out like the coding I'm really good at. Like I've been doing that for a really long time. Getting the word out about it and getting people to use it, that is definitely more my difficulty. I've never really had to market something. No one's ever asked me to do that at work. They've always been content with my programming abilities. And then some in terms of actual roadmap, I'm working on a feature to like sort of show the user where the event is in the image. Because sometimes you have an image with like 20 events on it. And like, if you want to double check that the software did everything correctly, you know, I'm trying to like make it easy to center in on where the event is. And then I've also sort of toyed around this with this idea of, could I like find events that our users are interested in? Could I sort of like, if a user has, you know, added 100 different events to their calendar, I can probably figure out, I can, you know, use an LLM to figure out what kind of events they like, and then do some type of like, you know, search, some LLM search on the internet to find additional events and add it to their calendar. Yeah, so that's it. Let's talk afterwards. If you love my app, if you hate my app, if you think that, why am I doing this? OpenClaw can just do this as well. Let's talk afterwards. There's my socials. There's the app. Let me know what you think. Thank you.
Any questions for Mike?
You know, the last two run.
Okay. He's gonna ask in private. Okay.
What?
It's just a quick question.
Who knows what my
Did you
question's gonna
try
be?
using any OCR software and compare that against OpenAI?
Yeah, so the question was, did I try using any OCR software? Yeah, so I actually am using it for a couple of different things. Actually, the very first version of this app a couple of years ago, I don't know why I just didn't think that LLMs would be good at this. So I tried to sort of do it myself with OCR, like OCR the image, and then sort of find dates in it, find names in it, find locations in it. But actually, what I'm using OCR for now is one of the things I mentioned, which is locating because OpenAI won't actually tell you how it found this event within the image. So I'm using something called I've used Textract, I've used Reducto, and I think Reducto seems better from what the tests I've done. And so I'm using that a little bit to like center some of the preview images around where the events are extracted.
I'll be patient. Thank you. Okay, so 2 parts. Dreaded but true. More of a question than a comment. I loved hearing how many times you said, I'm sure there's a better way, but this kind of works. Like, that's dope. Just to be like, yeah, I'm not gonna bike shed on how to make this perfect or ideal. So awesome. The thing I'm curious about, in particular, looking at like hotwire routes and that configurations controller, is that it kind of seems like creates a separate layer of where routing concerns live in Rails, right? Like normally all of those routes would actually be in the routes file. And I'm curious if you thought about that, tried to work with it and found that that's actually just the way to do it, or just did the thing that worked quickly. Like I saw it, I thought that was, and I hated that part mostly in about Hotwire native. And so I'm kind of just like, oh, is that just how that works?
Yeah, it's a good question. I kind of hate that part too. Like it's not very intuitive. Sometimes you spell things wrong and you don't really get feedback on that. So I could see that eventually, like that's just something like that comes with Hotwire native. So I could see like the team like deciding to go to like more a DSL basis. I think one of the reasons it's JSON for sure is that a strategy developers use is they put a cached copy within the app itself, so that when the app loads immediately, it knows the routing information within the app, and then it can be delayed and make a web request to get the most updated JSON. So that's kind of why it's in that format, is because eventually the app does need some kind of like JSON data to figure that out, because a lot of the stuff within that file is not decisions made on the server, it's decisions made in the client side. But yeah, it's a little unintuitive. It's been a struggle sometimes to figure out why something's not working when I think I did everything right. Good question.
Yeah, I have a small question about the product itself. So, it's actually really cool. You guys would think, okay, we don't have social life in San Francisco, right? So we don't care. Well, which is probably true. But and we have Luma, right? That's it. Well, but at the same time, we do have something, right? And sometimes you find like, okay, you're thinking, okay, this is interesting. This is very cool. And then, so for example, one of my friends is like constantly trying to get me to go somewhere, but then it's too late. Like every time she's like, oh, I heard about this, like I saw this, and then okay, it's always past, like this whatever exhibition or this whatever, it's like it's over. And yeah, I'm also kind of like finding a lot of stuff, and so it's kind of cool to see, like to have this product essentially to kind of like, I don't know, tell you, okay, you have these options for tonight. They're actually tonight, and you can actually go, which is it would be something new, right? But yeah, the other source of events for, I think for me would be honestly like Instagram Reels and stuff like that, where, for example, I once went to people were drawing on the sand on Ocean Beach. Anybody went there? So on the Ocean Beach. So first of all, anybody goes to Ocean Beach, right? Yeah. So it's kind of cool, right? So there was an event where people were drawing like cool kind of like pictures on the sand. They're like very professional, some of them, and kind of like was super, super cool. And you could not like know about this event on Luma, and yeah, so your app is, I think, really needed for sharing, like it's essentially for turning those events that are kind of like off platform, right? They can be shared as posters or social media or like a lot of different ways, and then you can like platform them, and then other people can find them and come. So
Yeah,
it's
I
very
mean,
cool.
you know, so the app doesn't quite like it. I haven't quite nailed down like if there should be like a social aspect to it. That's like one thing I've sort of thought about is like because like I know some of the users have like taken like more private photos, like a doctor's appointment, stuff like that. Like they get like it, or like I had a bunch of users, which I had no idea this would be a problem. They get a big sheet from their kid's school and it's got like 30 events on it. And so they take a picture of the paper and it loads all of those into your calendar. And I don't have kids, so I never would have thought about that. But there's multiple people who have done that. And yeah, it works really well with Instagram. I would say about half of the images, I just take a screenshot of the Instagram post. That even works better than the web page because a lot of times Instagram just blocks you. So I just take a screenshot of the Instagram post and it works really well.
That's right.
Reels too?
What was that?
Reels on Instagram? Videos?
Oh, you know, I mean, if you screenshot the video, for sure it'll work. But yeah, no, it doesn't. I haven't really explored doing it with like videos or yeah, no.
Can you repeat the question?
Was it like, does it work with videos?
Yeah, like Reels on Instagram.
Yeah, no, it
Probably not as mentioned, but I think it's a good idea what you mentioned because I do see a lot of Reels of people talking, oh, today is this event, this Sunday is this event.
yeah, I see what you're saying. Oh, so you're not even talking about visual, you're talking about like the audio, like listening to like someone in the reels, like talk out an event.
Video where they could pop up the
Yeah.
text and
Yeah, it's a good, it definitely works if you take a screenshot of it, but right now, like there's no, there's nothing like, there's no like video component where I'd like, you know, search the whole video, but that is I do like that idea. Yeah. Thanks.
I have a quick question. So I also have a personal project where I have to use LLM for my service. But I like questioning how I'm gonna actually cover the cost. So I don't know, like for you, like this app, is it paid app? And if so, then you worry about people just using up too much LLM tokens.
Yeah, so I think at the start I was kind of concerned about it costing too much. So I like spent all this time building like a paywall. But what I've realized is it's so cheap. I don't even know why I wasted my time on that. I should have just launched it because it just doesn't really cost that much. And I have like alerts on like OpenAI, like to like alert me if I'm spending more than this per day. But I mean, and I actually have like something keeping track of like tokens use and like I can like see that like on a weekly basis across like all the different LLMs I use, how much I'm spending. And it's it's like I would have to have like probably like 1,000 more, more users to even like start to think about it. Like even if I had 1,000 users using it every day, then maybe I'd have to start thinking about it. So I mean, I guess the plan eventually, I mean, I would like to make some money on it. But for right now, I'm kind of just looking for just users to get feedback on it. Yeah. We're still doing.
This might be too much of a deep dive on an old pain point, but have you tried to get the LMM to? I don't know how you actually are pushing into the calendar, but have you tried to get the LLM to do like recurrence patterns with like iCal or something directly instead of just putting it into the JSON format that you have?
Yeah, so underneath, underneath, there's two methods to add it to your calendar. That native component that I showed you, you can just use that, or there's a sync component. So what I do there is I take the JSON and I convert it to an ICS file. And then, so if you want instead, you can subscribe to an ICS file, like in Google Calendar, Outlook, or whatever. And yeah, so it'll sync. So it supports all that. I mean, the ICS format's a little archaic, but there is a really good Ruby gem just called iCalendar, I think. And it does as a DSL, and it does a pretty good job. And it took some tweaking but I eventually got it kind of, working. Of course, you're at the mercy of Google deciding to refresh. because you can't, it's not, you can't push to Google. You host a web URL and Google decides whenever they want to, they'll pull from that. So there's always going to be some delay with that approach. But yeah, there's not really, good way around that.
To Irina's point about social, I feel like it could be interesting to have like a local feed of public images, like what have other people near you taken pictures of? Because
Yeah.
like I may not be walking down that street that week and see
yeah.
something. So it could be interesting to like see like what have other people near me deemed interesting enough to
Oh, yeah.
photograph.
Yeah.
Find out about things happening in other neighborhoods and stuff.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think that's a cool way to put it. I think, yeah, I guess I just have to like figure out, I guess it'd have to be like opt-in, or you'd have to choose like per image, like check this box, make it public. But yeah, that is a cool idea to kind of like crowdsource events that aren't listed necessarily anywhere other than like a flag, like a telephone pole.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks.
Right. Yeah.
Folks, let's do a 20 minutes break, and then after that, so yeah, please, meet your neighbors, meet people, and then after that, we'll form a kind of like a physical line for the open mic.
Hello, everyone. So my thing to demo is a new project that just launched this week at gem.coop, where we are building new like a new community-oriented server for hosting gems. We just launched namespaces for people to be able to upload their own gems. Yay! Great. So I can show you what it looks like in like 30 seconds, maybe. There is a sign up page where you can say what namespace you want, and then we will send you an email that says, congratulations, you got your namespace, and we'll tell you to generate a push key, and then we'll email you the push key. And I know it's really awkward. We haven't built good tooling for pushing yet, but it does technically work. You can then take the push key and go publish your gem. This will probably fail because I already did it once. It worked. All right. It pushed. It already exists. Proof that it works. And then once it exists, we will show that. Oh, right. This is the form to get the push key that you just saw in the email. And then once you have pushed it, you will get your own cool little page for your namespace with the gems that you have pushed. And if you want to use those gems, you can copy from here or click the little copy button and bundle init. Add that gem from that source that is your specific namespace, and then the gem works. Hooray! All right, that's it. We would really love for you to test that out and try out your own namespaces and tell us what is good or bad or should change or whatever, so that we can officially release and no longer be in beta. Thanks so much. Okay, next person.
I don't have a presentation. Hi, I'm Ziggy Gable. I am working on a RubyConf talk that's going to be really fun, I hope, if it gets accepted. The talk is going to be about what cursed platforms does Ruby actually run on? And I have a bunch of good candidates. Maybe I can bring one with me, but if you guys have any thoughts or feelings about ones that might work or not work that you would like to see Ruby run on, let me know. Talking about things like MS-DOS or let's see, there was an HPUX one a while back. There's so many cursed platforms if you go through the mailing list far enough in history, and also not that much further back in history than you think you would have to for some of these. It's insane. Some of the platforms people were still supporting as recently as like 2010. So it's going to be part history, part fun. You know, I'm still trying to work all the details out and, you know, come up with a good proposal for the team of people reviewing. But if you have any thoughts or whatever, let me know. You can find me on Telegram, Discord, everywhere that you probably are. I probably am too, except Twitter. Ziggy the Hamster, and on ruby.social, I'm Ziggy the Hamster, ruby.social, or Ziggy at ziggythehamster.sh. Any of the following preceding, those will all work. And then also, I no longer work for the bookseller, and I'm applying for some of y'all. But if you want somebody with 20 plus years of experience with Ruby, I might be your gender neutral guy. Anywho, thanks. I'm gonna hand off the next one.
Hey everybody, I'm Miles Georgi. A couple weeks ago, I was bored, so I decided to goof about with Ractors and figured I'd share a story about that. So the first thing I wanted to do was benchmark Ractors against threads, because if I come up with the right workload, then Ractors should complete the task faster than threads. So the workload I came up with was pretty simple. Just take a ton of random numbers and multiply them all together. Made 4 Ractors and just pass the numbers to them one by one, and then pass the special symbol at the end to tell it to stop. Pretty simple, straightforward. Then for the threaded version, I wanted to do it apples to apples. So I created 4 threads, but then how do I get the numbers into the threads? I don't want to, you know, split the numbers into 4 batches because that wouldn't be apples to apples. So I had to create a queue for each of the threads. And I know that queues in Ruby are thread safe and all that. And so then it dawned on me, all this code is exactly the same. The only difference is instead of passing the number to the Ractor, I'm passing it to the queue that's associated with that thread. I'm like, I'm combining a queue with a thread. This is just an actor. And then it dawned on me, wait a minute, actor, Ractor? So I didn't know that, but I guess Ractors are just actor with an R in the front, I suppose, for Ruby. So that kind of surprised me. And then, you know, the whole thing kind of made more sense at that point. But yeah, so that's it.
Hi everyone, my name is Rhiannon. You might know me from previous meetups. I do marketing. Mike mentioned earlier about calendar vision that he's really good at building things, but isn't as experienced with getting people to use the things he has built. If that's relatable to you, if you have built something, preferably something that has been funded and you need someone to help you get people to use it, please come talk to me. I'm here. You can find me on social media as well. I'm not going to spell, my name's really hard to spell. You'll figure it out. Or just come talk to me because that's the easiest way to have a conversation. I'd love to help you on a fractional basis, on a project basis. Yeah, I've also been vibe coding some fun Rails apps recently, sometimes streaming. Again, find me on social media or just come find me here. Okay, thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Daniel, a founder of the company Ubicloud. We're currently hiring, and I want to let people here know about that. Ubicloud's name comes from ubiquitous cloud, and we aim to be able to turn off-the-shelf bare metal into a cloud, portable, cost-effective, and for some deals, private. We often refer to our mission as an open source alternative to AWS. It's written in Ruby, but not with Rails. We use the Jeremy Evans stack, Rhoda, Rodoth, and SQL, and he's right over there. We're looking for people that enjoy exacting and painstaking work to improve security and reliability. We boot well over 1 million VMs a week. Small abnormalities really add up, and we need to find them. If you have an interest in or already know quite a lot about Linux, Postgres, networking, operating systems, or microprocessors, this might be a good opportunity for you. come find me or ask Irina who that guy was. Get my email, and I'm Daniel at ubicloud.com.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jake. I just recently, you guys have probably all heard about OpenClaw. Sure. There's a new device. I don't know how new it is, but it's something called Open Home. It's a physical device that lives in your house, and it works very much like an Alexa or a Google Home or whatever. They just released some dev kits, and I was given one of them. I'm waiting for it to show up on Monday. But I'm really excited to start building on this. And my idea is to build some sort of like an ambient operating system for your life. So it can participate in your work, you can participate in your day-to-day life, you can program it to do stuff in your house, like turn on your lights and all that stuff. But if anybody's interested in that idea, please come talk to me. I'm going to start working on this next week, and I'm really excited.
Oh, hello, Ruby friends. It's me again. This time, though, I'm actually going to tell you about a new project that I'm working on for a talk that I'll be giving in Hokkaido later this year called Ragents, and it's a Ractor-based agent gem. And it's the whole purpose of the talk that I'm working on is to explore the benefits of the local garbage collection that we now get in Ractors. If you want to follow along with the work I do, you can go to activeagents.ai and sign up for the newsletter, which I haven't used at all in the entire year that I've had it. I got like 1,000 users, but that will change soon. So activeagents.ai. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
No.
Turn screen. Yeah, that's good.
Yes, here.
Even more. Okay, a little bit of an inside joke. Uh-oh. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm just up here to talk really briefly about JavaScript. Haha, just kidding, no. I have been working just in my free time on a Ruby interpreter. It's actually an implementation of YARV, the yet another virtual machine, and it's in TypeScript. It's not really for actual business purposes. It's just for fun to learn how Ruby works. This is an implementation of the unique array unique method. You can a lot of concepts borrowed from C Ruby in here, like qnil and things like that. It's just a lot of fun to work on. So if you are interested in learning how to write Ruby and JavaScript, and check out the repository, github.com/camertron/garnet-js. That's it. Okay.
And okay, I'm the last one for the open mic. Just a few announcements. One is we have the website sfruby.com. You should go there and you should go and join the Slack. That's number one. Also, you can sign up to our newsletter and socials and all of that. You will see the next meetup is announced. It's March 24th, right? And this is going to be at Cisco Meraki, and Cameron is actually hosting as the part of Cisco Meraki team, which is great. And yeah, so go there. The second announcement is if you are a Ruby startup like Ubicloud and you're hiring, we will post your jobs to our SFRuby job board, and for free. That's what I'm trying to say. And again, some companies are actually paying us tons of money. I mean, sponsoring the conference just to get there, you know, on the job board. Obviously, this is the best Ruby job board that you've ever seen. The reason is all the companies are amazing. Like all the companies that posted jobs there, they're like absolutely fantastic. You have Persona, you have big companies, you have Omada Health and like a bunch of companies, and you have startups that so WAP just really can like asked me, pleaded me kind of to post their job there. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, if you are a Ruby startup, kind of like early stage, growing, we will post your job there. So let's please, use this job board and maybe tell us if you found a job there. That'd be also nice. So just use it, and I think it's a nice resource to connect you all to the startups. Finally, yeah, I just to be honest, I didn't even want to share about it, but I posted it on Twitter that I've built something in the last 2 weeks, and a few people here asked me about it, and I will overcome my embarrassment in a second. So actually, it's a good kind of like warm up to the next talk, because so I built. Guys, if you don't know, I'm Irina. I am a CEO at Evil Martians. It's a team of 50 people. We are in 14 countries, so I have a lot of stuff to do. That's what I'm trying to say. But the last 2 weeks, namely 2 weekends, I was building a bunch of Rails applications, and I just wanted to mention one of them. And of course, this is all AI-powered coding, as you can imagine. But there was something that helped me tremendously. And by the way, I'm building something in TypeScript as well, just because I have to, not because I want to, honestly. But it was much worse, like so much worse. It was just like a nightmare in comparison to, AI-assisted coding with Rails. Maybe with Rhoda as well, but I kind of like picked up a lot of stuff from the Rails community. I have some background as a Ruby engineer, but that was many, many years ago. So let me just show you this very, very quickly, just to kind of like maybe get you interested. All right. Yeah. So this is an internal system. I call it Solaris, of course. And because we are from Mars. Yeah, and yeah, I will screen share it in a sec. And what it's doing is, yeah, it's kind of, first of all, we are a consulting company, so we have people on projects. So I used to have around 200 Google Sheets. Justin, am I pronouncing correctly? Sheets.
Yeah.
It's my best, like, honestly.
Just focus.
Focus. Yes, I need to focus. So it's, first of all, kind of like, Jesus.
Focus.
Yeah, it shows, where everybody is. By the way, I obfuscated data recently, so this is all, I don't know, we have Yoda. Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, it's Yoda. This is Yoda. I insist. And so we have our revenue. This is fake numbers, hopefully. And so, some invoices that were not sent and some payments that were not received and stuff like that. And what else? So I'll show you. By the way, this is all running on a bunch of stuff, including Marco Roth's Herb. So this is all Hotwire frontend. And I want to show you something real quick. Like this is the last one. This is my favorite one. Yeah, I'm kind of creating a new project. I'm picking Yoda, of course, my best engineer. And so look at this calendar. I really like it. Look at this. So it's showing when he has a holiday and when he's busy on other missions. I mean, okay, he's very busy, but isn't it a perfection? Yeah. So anyway, so that's what I gotta say. You might like my team. If you're anything like my team, you'd be looking at it, you'd be terrified. Like our CEO has to just like, what is she doing? Like, come on. Who's supposed to maintain all this shit? I'm maintaining it But it's thanks to the skills that Yoda gracefully shared with me, that I was it was actually a pretty fantastic experience. So I'm using something called Layer-Drails skills coming from Vova, and he's based on his book, and he will, I hope, talk about it today. But it really enabled me, like, because it helps you set up a certain architecture. It kind of helps Cloud Code review the architecture of what it's building, and it's just like night and day. Honestly, it's pretty fantastic. So that's just my experience, and yeah, I leave you with this. Again, go join our Slack, and the next speaker is Yoda.
As Irina told many times today, I'm Vladimir. I'm working on some skills. Okay. Some found them useful, but that's not really what I'm going to talk about today. Like a little bit, eventually. But my talk is. Let me check this one. All right. It's kind of inspired by my work on the skills and on the book. And also it's, so the talk I want to share today with you is the result of my work on the book, on the skills, and some recent experiments through the prism of this great old dystopian novel about San Francisco, which inspired me to give you that story. Do you recognize it from the cover? Any ideas? San Francisco people, I don't know about that book. Maybe someone who has relatives in libraries, yeah, well, that's the funny thing. I visited a bookstore today. I wanted to buy that book so to give away to someone because it's kind of classic. So the original book is called The Iron Hill, and the author is Jack London. And that's kind of a predecessor of 1984 and Brave New World. That's kind of the first dystopia about the world full of trust and corporations and socialists trying to fight them through the revolution. No spoilers. And that's not what I'm going to talk about today. The part of the book, the idea that inspired me to give the talk in such a way is the role of the Industrial Revolution that is described in the book, how it compressed workers, how it replaced them with machines, right? And that's something that actually reminds me the situation in the San Franciscan bubble today, right? We're all within this bubble. Of course, outside of it, it's not that bad, but here we are. And the situation is a bit different. Every now and then we hear about burnouts, like AI burnouts, we call them, right? We see skilled engineers who dedicated most of their lives to crafting software, kind of feeling a bit afraid of their future, of their role in that, in software development and around in tech. But no worries, it's not going to be a doom talk, right? I'm here not to make even more frightened. I want to share some kind of, I would say, pragmatic view on that, and start with the fact that we need to admit that the paradigm, like software development paradigm shifts, and that's, well, non-questionable, I think, anymore. The question is where it shifts to and how far, and what still matters, and what's left for us humans to do in that new kind of world. And that's what we're going to talk about today, and why I care about that, right? So what made me think about ask that questions? I mean, well, I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to write software, how to design software, like in Rails in particular. And I wrote a book. I just published the second edition. It's available. And now I'm thinking, does anyone need it like anymore? Who's gonna need the book if maybe AI can just solve all the problems and books just that's the thing about technical books. Previously, the book is almost outdated when it's out if it's a technical book because new versions came out, it's no longer relevant. But now the book is outdated even fully because you don't read books, you just type prompts, right? So but still I wanted to ask myself this question. So it's a question about software architecture. Does it still matter? And if it matters, how much, and what's the new role of software architecture in AI-driven development? So let's take a look at the past. Because to understand how and why it can be relevant today, we need to understand how it became relevant in the first place, right? Why we invented clean code, hexagonal architecture, DDD, whatever, like layered architecture, right? Primarily to solve two problems. First is a code complexity, fighting code complexity, making software maintainable so we spend less on adding new features or fixing bugs or handling growth issues. That's the first point. And another point is kind of very similar, but from the human perspective, for coordination between engineers, teams, and so on, because proper architecture makes this coordination easier and more efficient. So what about now, when the paradigm shifted already? The thing is, the way we define complexity, like code complexity in the past, kind of changed. I can't say how exactly, but it's clear that the way we treated complexity in the past and we're going to treat it in the future or even today is not the same. And teams are no longer, like, there is a tendency of teams getting smaller. And the fun fact, we started it with Rails. All this one-person framework move was also the kind of the beginning of this new movement when there's also one person everything, and one person and many Cloud Code tabs. Anyway, or whatever you're using. And of course, expectations are rising because product managers, owners, whoever expect more from you because everyone is 10x or 100x engineer with all this tooling. And that changed the original reasons. We need to take a look at them through this new kind of perspective. But there are things that still matter, independently on how you write code. Because we must talk about writing code, kind of maintaining it. But there are some characteristics of the software you're working on that are going to be relevant, I think, for a bit longer. I'm not sure they're going to be relevant like in 5 years or whatever, but for longer than other aspects, like performance, stability. I mean, you cannot ship bugs in production if you have a lot of users relying on your software, right? And that's where AI generation kind of lags behind right now. It requires a lot of, I would say, harness. There's some harness to prevent this stuff. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And also, one aspect I want to highlight is a kind of feedback loop, because we still in the loop when we're working on the software, even if it's kind of local development feedback loop. Maybe it's not exclusively human feedback loop. AI feedback loop is also a thing, right? The kind of a speed in which your code generation agent can produce a plan or a feature or review, whatever. And that's one aspect. And another aspect is kind of CI feedback loop, because I heard recently there is some kind of a notion of the future, developments that you are AI first company if you can fix and ship a bug the same day you discovered it, right? Something like that's not always possible in classic projects. But in order to ship things as fast, you need your builds to be fast. You can't afford builds running for dozens of minutes or hours. And that's a common problem, especially in Rails applications. And many bigger projects, They have CI pipelines that you cannot just push a fix right now. You need to maybe 2 or 3 hours, including all the pipelines and all the stagings of whatever happenings there. So just a quick example of the last item. One of the projects Irina worked on. Yeah, I'm gonna call names. Why not? So we have our fork of Fizzy, and I'm gonna talk about Fizzy a lot today because that's a cool open source project for experiments. So, and we decided to add a Trello import there. Well, through Cloud Code. And after that, the CI build time increased by 4 times, just with the addition of 2 test files and like 20 examples. Minitest is not fast if you're, generating code without actually looking at it. So yeah, I had to take a look because how I found that. Speaking of feedback loops, I was working on another feature with Claude, actually, like experimenting. And I found that it fails to run the whole test suite because the default timeout is like 5 minutes for bash command. And it just fails. And it just ignores the fact that it cannot run the test. Oh, okay, I cannot run the test. Let's assume it's working. So, and it continues. So it actually affects stability, not only a feedback loop. It affects all the part of the kind of a process. So yeah, I had to fix it manually, and the fix was pretty trivial. I'm not talking about it today, but I wish we had something to prevent such a situation, right? And that's what we're going to talk about today. All right. So the question is, I already probably provided an anti-example, but can AI, like LLMs, agents, whoever, guarantee the kind of some quality of service regarding these metrics to provide good enough performance, avoid bugs as much as possible as humans can, and do not affect negatively the feedback loop. And I think yes, they can, but they need some help from us humans, some guidance. And that's if you think about those aspects. Actually, maybe not directly for some of them, but a proper architecture, proper software design, the design of your application also affects all of them. And by introducing it, you can help agents to not violate this rule, not, I don't know how to say that, not negatively affect this qualities. So that's why I was like, okay, yeah, I have some examples, I have some ideas in mind, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, architecture is still important, right? Like, even in my book, in the new edition, they asked me to add something about AI. So anyway, I have some like paragraph that, yes, a layered architecture, you kind of introduce boundaries and you reduce the context required to work on the feature or review the feature. Well, that's all sounds reasonable to me. But that's just my gut feeling. And as a mathematician and an engineer, I should not trust gut feelings. I either trust like proofs or at least experiments. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to conduct an experiment because I don't know if like the formal proof is something is hardly possible in case of LLMs, I think. Maybe, but that's too much for meetup talk. Anyway, so what I did, I decided to compare 2 architectures using like same application, one part of it, like one responsibility is implemented differently. It's authorization. So I migrated Fizzy to use policies instead of model predicates and authorization code spread across many different concepts like concerns, helpers. Anyway, I'm going to show some examples. And so having these 2 versions of the same application, I decided to add a new feature, add a new requirement. So I want to add a new row to the system, something that doesn't exist. So just a quick reminder what Fizzy is. Fizzy is Kanban as it should be. So it's, yeah. Well, it's a kind of Trello-like application I'm going to talk, because why I say Trello-like, because we migrating from Trello to Fizzy, and it's really, it works well. So you have cards, boards, columns, and there are just 2 roles, basic roles, like admins and members. That's it. And yeah, so that's two versions of Fizzy I kind of prepared for the experiment. So the base one, as I already mentioned, model predicates, concern, and so on. And then I want to use an action policy and policies and a limited set of, say, helper methods and controllers and views to check the access rules. So that's how it looked like in the stock version of Fizzy. So we have a module row with concern actually for the user, and a lot of methods like can, do, whatever. So whatever you add a new resource, if you add a new resource, and we're doing that our version, you just drop a few predicates and that's it. It's fine. It kind of works for the base version. So, and that's how it looks with action policy. So we have a resource-oriented policies, and you define the same rules, but in a dedicated kind of layer of your application. So all the logic lives in policies. You don't need to look at models or wherever else to understand who and why can access which action or which resource. And from the presentation layer perspective, like for example, from the controller, the difference between those two is this. So we just replace sometimes scope-based authorization or like custom helpers, like ensure permission to whatever, with standardized authorized calls or allowed to calls if you don't need to raise an exception. So that's how that's the difference between two architectures in a nutshell. All right. Before I'm going to show you some results, we need to talk about what do we want to compare? What do we measure, right? And that's a good question, right? Because, well, first thing, of course, is stability. So which architecture results in less bugs when I ask to implement a new feature related to it? Because as I'll show later, all of them produce bugs without like a proper setup, but some more, some less. We can talk about tokens usage or like cost, but that's actually a tricky question. And the final aspect, I think that's still the most important, I call it like reviewability, is we still need a human at some points, maybe reviewing code. I hope you do that, at least like, you know, not the whole code, but the critical parts. And I was exploring, you know, different threads and conversation. I found that's really good quote. Someone said, yeah, you don't need to look at the code. Never ask a person who is, you know, being on call and needed to fix a bug in production in the middle of the night and understand what's going on. So that's a situation where when you're not going to open Claude code, you're going to take a look at the actual place in code and try to understand what's going on, because still humans, like skilled humans, react faster on, you know, such situations. Anyway, so that's something we want to explore. And the first experiment I conducted is kind of like naive approach. Like many people use Claude code this way. You just open terminal and say, hey, like Claude, let's add a new role viewer and like some requirements, and just go and implement it. That kind of one-shot feature implementing. Sorry. So, and I did this for both versions. And then I asked some agents and skills to review the implementation, make a thorough review to identify gaps and bugs. So as it turned out, in the base version, the implementation, which Claude was ready to commit and push, contained like 7 unprotected actions. So a user could just, a viewer could modify some data, and there were no protection at the controller layer, because, well, there are a lot of controllers actually, 50 something or maybe 70, and it just missed some of them. Oh, that's fine. There were a lot of UI gaps. What is UI gap? Is then when you have a button, say like edit a card, but your viewer, you cannot edit a card. You can hit the button, nothing's going to happen, like 403 error, but still you should not see that, right? And in the layered version, we had no unprotected actions. So the security aspect of the app didn't suffer, which is good. But still we have UI gaps, and in this case, for some reason, more UI gaps, and some rules were not implemented correctly based on the requirements. Another thing here is kind of related to reviewability. The amount of files changed. It's almost twice less in the layered version. That's because we have all the authorization logic kind of localized and in policies. But I would say this experiment is actually, well, it's interesting in maybe a bit from the aspect of how good is just base like cloth code or whatever without any extensions. But that's not how you probably write software these days, and not how I write software. We have some workflows for building with AI. And in particular, I'm and a lot of people on our team, we adopted the compound engineering plugin by Kieran, and it decomposed the whole work on the feature into kind of 4 phases. Plan, which creates a file plan, and you can add a plan review. Then it works on the implementation. Then it reviews it again, and you can fix bugs after that. And then there's a compound phase to generate some knowledge out of it that could be used for future enhancements. And in this case, we're not even talking about stability, because from our experience, a decent number of iterations, a good work on the review phase especially, helps to identify most of the bugs. Now, it works almost as good as a human engineer. Still, we have human review after that when the PR is open, but at the development phase, it helps to identify everything. So stability aspect is going to be the same for both architectures. What we want to look at, we actually want to look how the architecture behaves in the dynamics. We just don't want to introduce one feature. We want to see the evolution of the feature and how it's affected by the chosen architecture. So first we add a row, then we add a new kind of related feature. Oh, let's hide some columns from viewers, right? And then, oh, maybe we can hide columns not only from viewers, but everyone except admins. So it's kind of a clearance-based authorization, clearance-based access. And I try to implement all these features, free features one by one for both architectures. And that, in my opinion, should have been enough to demonstrate if there is any benefit in a, kind of a well-defined architecture, or just a Rails way. It's not a code mess, right? So physics code base is very well defined, but it follows like just different standards, I would say, different conventions from all the popular architectural patterns. But still, it's well defined as just a small subset of APIs and techniques. But still, we want to compare if introducing abstraction, introducing a layer, and this kind of isolation at the architecture layer makes sense. So what we ended up, I'm looking here, first of all, from the reviewability, I'm looking at the number of files changed at each iteration. And we see that, like layered version has smallest number of files, and it's the first step is the most important, just more than twice less files required to just introduce the row. And then we have less and less and less. And that could be explained by the compounding effect of the architecture. Because, for example, when we go from columns hidden for viewers only to columns hidden for different roles depending on the setting, we don't need to change anything at the presentation layer, because we already introduced scoping and authorization checks. We only need to change the policies. Maybe some views, because, well, we have new UIs. That's why we need to change views at every step. But the authorization logics, the scope of changes for the logic itself is smaller. And, well, I asked Claude, of course, to do a thorough analysis of these versions and say, oh, yeah, so that was, AI is very good and praising. The layered version is dramatically easier to review. Well, I would say dramatically. We need to conduct an experiment with real humans, actually, or to, suggest such statements. But anyway, what's interesting, Okay, that's not that interesting. Yeah, we have a lot of before actions based version. That regarding stability, even with this compound engineering like process with power review, planning, and so on, one critical bug leaked in the base version because given the amount of changes, the amount of callbacks, especially, and this indirection that introduced by this base approach, it just lost some. Not even an edge case. It was a pretty valid case, but it just lost it along the way. And the layered version had no bugs all the way down. All right, that's some data. What does it tell us? I think actually it tells us that, yeah, so from the review perspective, there is a big difference. So, and that's expected. That's why we introduced abstractions before AI, right, to fight complexity. And it reduced the number of bugs that could escape and so on. But okay, sorry, I have tokens here. What's interesting here about tokens, I measured the usage within the current session because I don't really know how to properly count tokens, especially when using a lot of sub-agents and all this background stuff. Well, there are some plugins and tools I know, but does it even matter, right? Because I have some session limit that Claude provides me. I don't even know how much tokens that because it's not in tokens, right? And I was looking at how fast my ability to generate code disappears in both versions. And it turned out that in a layered version, it's a bit faster. So it consumes more AI like quota. I think the reason is mostly in the planning and reviewing phases, partially because I have more skills that need to work, more agents that need to analyze like the layers and all that stuff. And those skills are far from ideal. I think we haven't learned yet how to write skills that do not harm the usage. That's something that's going to happen at some point. And I hope someone just fork my skills and do that. I don't want to deal with this. But another thing, I was thinking like, why it's consuming more tokens with a good architecture. I expected less actually. And for the work phase, for the implementing, for writing code, it consumes less, but it consumes more for thinking phases. And I think maybe that's because thinking in some kind of architectural pattern, even for human, is more thought consuming. And so that's why for AI it is as well, because it must follow more rules and check more rules, not just, oh, that looks good, and let's continue generating the code. So that's probably that's how it could be explained. All right. So I've been talking about skills and the importance of actually not only the architecture chosen, but the way you generate code. And what is architecture? Architecture is actually multi-layered thing in itself. Like there is a book called Patterns of Software Architecture. No, it's pattern-based software architecture. I think something like that. And that book introduced this hierarchy. So we have idioms, right? It's like a shorter snippets of code, how to write and not to write. It's something that RubyConf performance scopes do for you, right? So this snippet of code is better than another one, like a very local micro level, like architecture patterns at micro level. Then we have design patterns like services, form objects, whatever. And then we have got a system design pattern or architectural patterns like layered, clean, hexagonal, whatever. And now we actually have, I call them AI orchestration patterns, the way we organize agents. And that's a new level that we are kind of introducing now into our everyday work. And that's the difference between just one-shotting features with Claude and using, for example, compound engineering or whatever else, or using hooks or, well, I don't know. Again, it's still being crystallized. We don't have a lot of proven techniques, and I'm not sure it's going to happen anytime soon. But the idea that you need something, some workflow, some patterns of writing code with AI, that's what important, and that's what changed here. But here I want to do some detour and talk about skills for a moment, because I already mentioned them. Let's dig deeper. So some skills we use and we maintain, as already mentioned, layered rails. We have recently released inertia rails skills for apps using inertia. And I don't have a lot of links here. So if you have suggestions, please give me some, because I think what Brandon was showing me before the meetup, he's working on the, I want to say, like, it's a pack analysis software for identifying this modernization status of the project. And there are some AI features as well. And that could be, I think there are already some pack skills, that helps you to write code or review code on violations using AI. But that could be on the list. I'm just thinking, I'm planning to work on RSpec skills, for example, because that RSpec mini test situation happened recently. I'm on it, so that's going to be the next thing, I hope, and a lot of other stuff. I want to talk about my skill set, layered rails. So it comes with a few commands and agents. The one I'm using mostly just for testing is called analyze, and it does a lot of analysis of the code base and tries to evaluate the project from the perspective of the book. So the way I generated the skill, I just took the book and compressed it into a skill for a few iterations, and then manually added some bits of it. So it tells you about callbacks usage, get objects, layer violations, and so on. I can provide some report. This is for Fizzy, overall health, whatever that means. It's not my idea. You can find the full report online. It's a very long one. It just suggests some ideas on how to refactor the code to avoid, say, like request params leaking into models or jobs or whatever. That's an example, right? Or whatever, and stuff like that. We also have other commands, like I said, got objects and callbacks. The reviewer that could be integrated either into compound engineering plugin, it works with it, or as a separate hook just to review features. Oh, you're violating some rules, or it's probably better move to another abstraction. And there's also such thing as specification test. So that's a term I introduced in the first edition of the book, and it's kind of a technique of identifying the unnecessary responsibilities of the object. So you just try to sketch the tests required to, without the implementation, just the scenarios required to test the class, and you quickly identify, oh, we testing here something that is irrelevant to this particular object. It should be moved somewhere. We need to decompose or extract or whatever. And there is an example of the specification test for the travel import object I mentioned before, right? The one that caused issues on CI. And that's the suggested specification test based on the class. And we see that, okay, it's domain level logic, it's okay. Or we have some duplication from another model. The last one, it should not be tested here. It's just an access test. That's another problem, right? With AI, it generates tons of tests. And there must be some skill or review agent that analyze the tests and remove the useless ones. Because they want us to spend more tokens, but we want to have our CI builds faster. And the same command also analyze existing tests if they're already tests, and it helps to identify issues. For example, that's what kind of the issue we had. One of the issue we had related to the speed of the test, because we had two objects like throw import and throw import processor, which is responsible for processing the JSON file, and both had the same set of tasks, because I don't know why. Maybe historically there was just single object, there was instruction, but tests left as is, and we had the number of tests doubled. And here we see it clearly. Oh, we're testing a processor here in the model class, but we already have them, and it should be moved somewhere or removed completely. So that's just an example of skill and what can be done, what can be introduced into the process of building software with AI. And yeah, so pattern-oriented. Oh, yeah, that's how the book is called. Pattern-oriented architecture. So now we have a new layer. And besides, we also have the importance, the weight of each previous layer changed. For example, for like micro patterns, idioms, AI can do 99% of work. You don't need to worry about that. For design patterns, it also works well. With architectural stuff like layers and all this separation and boundaries, humans still require at least the review phases. But to orchestrate all this AI chaos, there is only one option, human. Even if you, you can add an agent that's going to orchestrate agents, but that's won't turn out well, I think. So yeah, that's what I was talking about. This is the new look and the role of architecture in software development. So it's not that the previous concepts are still important. They are, but less than before. But we have new concepts to embrace and to learn. And that gives. Now let's go back to the book, the original one, the Iron Hill. So speaking of industrial revolution, Jack London mentioned the phenomenon of machine breakers. The workers who were against introducing machines, in particular weaving looms, because they could replace, like one weaving loom replaced like a dozen workers. They out of jobs. They paid less. So they were trying to destroy them, fight against them. And that's a category of, there is always such category in every, I think, industrial revolutions. In our case, those are AI refusers, right? People who don't want to use it, don't trust it, don't believe all the bullshit posted on LinkedIn. And that's a second category, actually, wipe coders. Those who just, hype writers. And this is the group that will probably disappear silently in a short period of time, and it's just a distraction. You should not look at what they're talking about, because the picture of the world will be less, bright. I think if you're gonna read all the people, I built a few startups over the weekend, right? And so on. All the stories not helping a lot. It's not about software engineering at all. And there is a final group. It's kind of adopted engineers who embrace the new paradigm, that engineers who know that the previous experience and knowledge is still relevant. And it actually, on top of that experience and knowledge, you can build new one for the new part of the workflow, right? For this AI orchestration layer. And that's something that we should aim for and look for, instead of like thinking, what am I going to do if I lost my job? It's because of AI. It's not because of AI, it's because of money. So yeah, I think that's what I wanted to tell. In the original book, it was about our revolution. We need to fight corporation and so on. I don't think, we don't need to fight AI, right? So there's a big difference in this story. But there's still a room for revolution. It's a revolution within us. So we need to revolutionize ourselves, to start looking differently at what we're doing. And that's how we just turn into next level generation of software engineers, still engineers. That's all from my side. Thank you very much. And I have a book, but I had an idea how to give it away to the first person who will recognize the Jack London's book. We have one more. We don't have a talk. We have a QA session, right? Q&A session. Anyway, any ideas here? Do we have a?
Yeah. Let's take a question.
Oh, questions. Yes, that's a good one. All right. Yeah. Oh, thank you. So.
Hello. Okay, so how have you been dealing with like non-determinism on the skills? Because you can have skills, but it like you have a set of instructions that needs to be evaluated, and at least like with people working in my teams, they're like, oh, but I can't trust that it will generate like all the what I'm trying to evaluate every time the same thing. And this has been like super hard because people want to keep control of things. And how have you been dealing with like this struggle between things that are like deterministic and we have been doing for a long time, and this new paradigm where you're like not having a lot of control, but you still need to keep control?
Yeah. So speaking of kind of instructions and skills and producing, the same result, right, for the same task. I think what I'm doing in my skills, they're not ideal because I'm kind of iterating every time I see some problem. I just push a new version. It's fine. But what I want to do in the skills, I try to encode some kind of I would say patterns. So not particular examples of code. That works very bad. I tried that actually with like action policy skills, and it's just doesn't understand how to do that. It's just copy and pasting. But with layers, it's a bit easier because I'm not providing examples of code. I'm providing some ideas. Oh, if you see I ask AI to analyze. Oh, you analyze the objects, actors, and this interacting with this object. Where are they coming from? Like inputs and so on. So what are their nature? It's pretty good in identifying which project belongs to which layer, and then you just need to do this coordination. So it's the way the skill work is closer to the static analysis that is hard to implement, right? So that's where this non-determinism works. You don't need to write all the rules because it could be implemented deterministically, but it would require a lot of time. And here AI works. So that's the idea of encoding not examples, but some concepts that could be applied to different code snippets. So questions? No more questions? Or yeah, that's a great question there. Thank you.
Good question. So you get
yeah.
Yeah, we just have to.
Okay. All right.
So thank you, Moffatt.
Thank you.
And yeah, let's go straight into the last session. But after this, we already have plans. So we'll go to a bar. What is it called? What is it? Pagan Island. And sorry, Idle. Sorry, guys. I think we were there before, right? We were there once. Maybe I think so. So Pagan Idle. Yeah, and so you can ask questions then. That's what I'm trying.
I guess I wouldn't call it a talk. Our last piece of entertainment for the evening is Mr. Brandon Weaver, who will be taking questions. Yeah, do you have a song and dance routine picked out, or is this just questions and answers? Or oh, sorry, right. So Brendan, I think you recently joined Ruby Central, right?
Yeah.
So it's a Q&A. You can ask Brendan whatever you like, I assume, about Ruby Central, and I think he'll try his best to answer your questions.
I think it'll be easier to use this. You can have that one going around. So hello, everyone. My name is Brandon Weaver. So I just recently joined the Ruby Central Board of Directors, kind of representing the Ruby community, where we're going, what we're doing from there. So just to head off, one of the more popular questions about what exactly is the nature of what we're doing with Ruby Gems and Bundler and that entire incident. Frankly, I do not have an answer to share with you today. We are working on postmortems to try and answer some of those questions, which we will be sharing with the community and trying to get into that. This is a very difficult topic, so I don't want to really broach into it without a lot of preparation, a lot of thoughtfulness, and a lot of review on that. So I can't really answer questions about that or any matters surrounding that for tonight, but I am perfectly open for anything else. So do we have any questions? Open it up. Back there.
Yeah, yeah. I guess Brandon, my question would be like, what are you hoping to bring to the Ruby Central, and yeah, like why did you decide to join? And yeah, what are you hoping to bring?
Yeah, so for me, I've gotten a lot out of Ruby over my career. I mean, quite frankly, it's made my career. It got me out to San Francisco. It got me out to a lot of places. It has given me a lot of money and a lot of community and everything else like that. So for me, this is a way to try and give back, to try and see what can I do to try and help this community, which gave so much to me, to give back to the next generation, and enable people to do that. So what I was looking for whenever I joined is that I remember back in about the 2014 to 2020 era is that you throw a rock and there's Ruby conference right there. There are local communities everywhere. There are meetups everywhere. There are people shaking hands, meeting each other, making new connections, making new jobs, making all types of things. And I think that over time, especially after 2020, that faded off very severely. And I don't think anyone's necessarily blamed for that, as much as we had a lot of people who did a lot of work who got tired. They had other things to do. They moved on with life. They ended up doing different things. And of course, a little thing we like to call COVID did not help that. So I think one of the things that I want to see is kind of a return back to basics of who were we in the community when we were really growing. And I believe that was a lot of local strength, like meetups like this, like San Francisco Ruby, like Blue Ridge Ruby, like everything that we're starting to see coming back. Is I want to invest more in the local community, more in what we're doing in our towns, in our cultures, in our communities right here today, versus just the national stage or even the international stage. Is who are we as Rubyists locally in San Francisco and Chicago, Seattle, where be it, and what are we doing to facilitate and grow those communities, invest in them, give them tools, resources, accommodations, whatever else we need to see those really flourish over time. So that's a lot of what I want to see is how do we start growing the community again and get back to some of those basics?
Hi, Brandon. I guess I'm curious, like, what are, yeah, who are you? Oh, I don't have any affiliation whatsoever.
Okay.
What do you mean? You want to ask a question?
Those were my questions. Who are you? What do you have to do with
Ruby Central?
My name is Rhiannon Payne. I have nothing whatsoever to do with Ruby Central. I was just curious, like, I know you guys are getting ready for RubyConf in Vegas this summer. Like, is that your primary objective right now, or how are resources being allocated internally now? Because I know you also still have open source stuff going on. Like, what does that breakdown look like?
Yep. So I think with especially RubyConf, there is a dedicated portion of the staff who's focusing on that. I am not currently in that dedicated portion. I think there's a lot we need to do around kind of the open source committee to mature that, grow that, and see where exactly we're going directionally, which is going to tie back into the Ruby Gems matter that we do need to address. I'm not going to dodge it, except to say that I want to make sure that any answer we have is a good and thorough answer, rather than just kind of a, we're not going to talk about that or anything else like that. I want to be able to give something to the community, which is a full and comprehensive answer as to what happened, where we got, and what exactly is going on there. We don't quite have that yet. I am working on that. So my primary focus as soon as I joined the board is how exactly do we propose to answer the community on those matters? How exactly are we going to take accountability? How exactly are we going to drive forward and then use that to propel ourselves into the future? And what does that mean for restoring trust with the community? What does that mean for engaging with the community again? What does that mean for open source? What does that mean for a lot of things? And those are hard questions that don't have easy answers. And again, I've only been on the board since January, so I'm trying to ramp up very quickly and find out how do we begin to answer a lot of these questions the community has. I think the other thing, as I was kind of alluding to, is how do we get back to some of our basics? How do we get back to who we were back in the days when we were really growing, of investing in those local communities, tools, resources, what have you, to really propel us forward? So a lot of it is just kind of who are we today? Who do we want to be? Because I don't think there really is a clear mission objective of who we want to be. And I want to make sure we have a very clear answer to that.
Yeah, Brandon. So for those, I'm sure like kind of like a lot of people, many people followed, they kind of like, I don't know, drama, the last year. Drama. That's the right word. So, so can you, Brandon, I know you kind of like, you just joined, so you're not kind of like indoctrinated or whatever. And what I'm trying to figure out is like, can you explain the relationships and kind of like your vision of the three organizations and where they stand? One is Ruby Central, another is Ruby Association, right, in Japan, and another one is Rails Federation. So this is an American nonprofit, right? As far as I understand.
Yep. So
Yeah.
Ruby Central was
Like,
originally.
who's in charge of what? Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. So let me see if I got the correct. So I believe it was Rails Foundation on that, which is primarily run via a lot of Rails, Amanda Perino and DHH and them, which is more of an international umbrella, which is we need to represent and get funds for Rails, which I agree with. That is very important. The next one is going to be the Ruby Association, which is in Japan, which is actual Ruby core architecture, I believe, as far as who's funding that directly. Ruby Central originally started up very much as how exactly do we fund conference organization? Because back in kind of that 2010 to 2020 era, there were a lot of conferences. There was a lot of very cheap money. There were a lot of companies that were earning a significant amount who were willing to invest back in the community. Well, for better or worse, that has very materially changed, and we're in a very different world than we were back then. So the question is, who do we become now that that era is in some ways behind us? Where do we go from here? Who do we end up being? For me, my personal bet is, again, kind of in that local conference space of how do we distribute and federate and really become a community which is distributed rather than there is one national event every year. And I'm going to be working on what do we do exactly to see that vision. Do you remind me of anything else that was under there? Sorry, there was kind of a lot.
So, Brandon, can you talk about the information?
Yeah. So from my understanding, those were transferred over to the Ruby Association and the Ruby core team. That said, I can't speak incredibly to that. I think that this is going to be something which is going to be reflected in post-mortem documents, which again, I want to make sure we get that right. It's been reviewed by everyone, including the Ruby Gems team, including everyone who was involved in that incident, to make sure that we have a good and thorough answer that actually reflects what happened and tries to get down to a lot of that. But again, if I dive too much into that, I don't want to phrase too much into kind of what happened without making sure that we have everything straight on that. And again, that is kind of hard because there was a lot that happened. I mean, we saw the fireworks, we saw the fun, we saw the drama and everything else like that. And that's really the core reason I joined Ruby Central is I wanted answers. I wanted to get answers for the community of what are we doing about this? How are we owning up to this? How are we going to give a clear and concise answer? Because you can't move into the future unless you can answer for the past. And that is something I hold to. That said, that is a very slow and arduous process to get those answers and try and make sure that we know everything that happened and trying to clarify that. So I don't want to promise things that I don't have right now, but that is something very dear to me that I did join exactly to try and litigate, which is what are we going to do about this? Because I don't believe the answer should be, let's hope it goes away. It's not going to go away. It needs to be answered to, and I'm going to make sure that we get those answers.
Here and then two more.
Ruby's always had the reputation of supporting earlier career developers. And I was curious, in addition to supporting meetups like this and different conferences, what ideas you had regarding facilitating mentorship. Is it, for example, steering folks towards maybe specific projects to work on, or online learning communities? Yeah, really curious about that.
And that's a great question. So I think there are a lot of people already in the Ruby community doing a lot of good here, such as we have Andy Kroll over with Bread and Ruby, who does a Ruby Friends thing or Ruby Mentors program, which is matching up very kind of established career developers with people who are newer to say, can we have a conversation? Can we effectively be pen pals where we talk and we have, say, one mentor to 3 or 5 mentees kind of talking through anything like that? That's something that I want to promote more, is that where are these ideas? They're doing these great things already in the community, because I think one quote I live by is I am not nearly young enough to know everything anymore. That there are a lot of people who are doing a lot of great things in the community. I am not new. I'm not novel. I'm trying to find who's doing great things. How do we promote that? How do we bring that to the rest of the community? So that's one thing, which is kind of that Ruby Friends and Ruby Mentorship program that Andy was hosting. And then from there, what do we do to start getting fellowships or open source programs where we're actually designating some of the funds coming in to newer career developers for apprenticeships or anything else like that? That's something I'd like to see. It's something I can't quite commit to yet, but what do we do to make sure that we're up leveling people, giving them opportunities, making sure especially underrepresented communities are given a lot of opportunity there? That said, it's going to be something I need to think on. That's something that is on my list to think on, is how do you represent everyone, not just the senior developers who've been here forever? They get a lot of representation already. They get a lot of credence, but how do we make sure that we actually have a new pipeline coming from that beginner audience to make sure they can find jobs, that they can find mentorship, that they can find community, that they don't feel like this is some insular club they're not invited to? Because that's not what I came into whenever I started, is that I didn't have a dang clue. I came from a small town in Missouri. I didn't know anyone. And then all of a sudden I found a huge community that I was able to invest in, grow in, and everything else like that. And I want to give that same opportunity to everyone else here. Is what do we do to recreate that pipeline? And right now, I'm not going to lie to you, the job industry is not exactly very pleasant. So maybe that's more difficult than I'd like it to be. But that doesn't mean we don't try anyways.
I'm not sure if you're familiar with, there's a conference.
You might hold it a little bit closer.
Sorry, I forget that these are weird like this. So you might be familiar with a conference, I don't know, confederation called Security B-Sides. If you're not, summarize it. Basically, it's sort of like for talks and such that are more local, that are not maybe good enough to go out and be put into like a big, nationwide con, like in the security industry, that might be Black Hat or DEF CON or whatever. But, in our case, it might be RubyConf. We had our sort of version of that where we had the SF RubyConf, right? So for me, like, as someone that has had experience with like that world, like that seems like a really cool thing if we could have like a yearly con that was, San Francisco or Sacramento or whatever. Like, there's there's a B-sides for Reno, B-sides for Pittsburgh, like, and it's just like one day, but like, it's people that are local giving the talk, giving whatever talks they have. And usually it's really easy to put that kind of thing on at a hotel or something, but like, I'm curious if that's like in the ballpark of like what you're imagining as far as like bringing up and lifting up the local communities.
Yep. So I'd say that's very directionally kind of what I'm looking at. I actually know a couple of people who organized that. One of them was my former coworker over at Square, so I do have some connections there. I'll have to ask them exactly what they're doing over there because I'm not familiar with exactly how it's run. However, there is Jim Rhymesick right now who's running EXO Ruby, who's doing a magnificent job, kind of a bus driving around and setting up local one-day conferences and doing an amazing job of that. I want to see more of that. I want to invest in that. And I want Ruby Central to be a nonprofit umbrella to allow them to raise funds for that, to collect donations, sponsors, other things like that, to make sure that we can make this sustainable, because no one should have to go bankrupt on a conference. No one should have to go really into debt to try and make a bet on whether or not this works. So I want to see that scale out to where we can allow people to really spin up kind of these cottage industries of local conferences where you're at, and then get you tools, resources, whatever else you need to do that. think you had a question earlier, or did you get that answered?
You guys can use that, Jen. You're good.
Sure.
No affiliation.
I'll ask another question. Brandon, as a board member, what kind of visibility, engagement, involvement do you have within the organization, and how much sort of like ability to or opportunity to create impact do you feel like you have thus far?
I think a lot of it is we have as much impact as we want to have. The problem is that everyone on Ruby Central has full-time jobs, might have a family, might have kids, might have a lot of other things they're doing. So it can be difficult at times to do that. Like most of the board meetings happen to be once a month. Now, that said, I've been pushing for more frequent board meetings, more frequent engagement and asynchronous, and then getting more committees, because we have to kind of distribute the load to make sure that we allow more representation. Like I want to see the open source committee really grow and thrive and become something where it can self-govern itself in some cases. Or say the conference circuit becomes its own community, or maybe security, or maybe any of these other concerns start to not really be blocked on the board as much as they're formally blessed and kind of allowed to grow autonomously. Now, that said, that's going to be a more long-term thing, but I want to see them getting that type of agency.
Oh, yeah, I have a question. Do you guys have any plans to work with boot camps? So this is something that, you know, the Ruby community is missing out on. So there used to be a lot of boot camps that taught Ruby, and now they all either, I think I was saddened to hear that like probably one of the last ones back in Denver kind of like stopped, closed off their Ruby program, or maybe they shut down. I forgot, but kind of like last year. What I'm trying to say is so we have a lot, like in the community, we have amazing companies, we have startups, we have this and that, but we don't have boot camps. And I feel like we don't have sort of like any way for people to learn Ruby in any kind of like structured way, except what Chris Oliver is doing with Guardrails. Yeah.
So there are a couple of things in there. Is that we've seen boot camps really take a dramatic downturn, and Jeremy had a question over there for afterwards. So it's been difficult, especially with newer career folks, to find jobs right now. I don't have an answer to that. I really wish I did, but I think that's just the state of the industry right now. Now, again, should we just take that as an excuse and say we don't do anything about it? No, I don't think so, but it's going to be very hard to find answers to that. I think one thing that I want to do is we have all these great speakers who do a lot of amazing things at all these conferences, which have all these skills, all these workshops, everything else like that. How do we start converting that back into training opportunities or other educational resources to try and use that to further them as speakers and individuals in the community, but also serve as a platform for hosting some of that type of stuff, maybe partnering with Guardrails, maybe starting to partner with some of these other educational resources and really start driving that up. One of the things that I really appreciated about the Rails Association is that they funded documentation significantly. They spent a lot of money on what do we do to make our docs clear? What do we do to make the onboarding experience better? What do we do to make this an end-to-end pleasant experience where people actually want to use Rails? I think there's a lot to learn from there. And I think there's a lot to learn from the Rails Foundation. And I think that we should very much be paying attention to that.
So my question is, what is the responsibility of the open source committee at Ruby Central? What do they do?
So that's something that I don't have a significant amount of insight into. That's something I do need to spend more time learning and kind of getting into. That was managed by other board members. That is something I'm going to be taking a more active role in. Again, I've only been there for roughly 2 months now, so I was very focused on kind of Ruby gems and how do we answer to that? How do we collect documents? How do we collect everything that's going on and find actual answers to that? So admittedly, I've not been very focused on what open source is doing right now. That is a lack of mine, and I will be remediating that.
Second question, are you looking for people to join either the open source committee or any other committees at Ruby Central?
Yes, I would say that we are going to be pushing to try and have more representation in our open source communities and kind of the committees that are running around that. What that looks like, I need to get a few answers on that, and how that starts to evolve. I also need to get a few answers on, but I want to see more representation from across the community in some of this stuff, and where that goes. Again, that's something I'm going to need to learn more about myself. I think we have time for one more, and then we should probably close it up there.
Are you familiar with the working groups idea that Adarsh brought up, like before he was out as the interim executive director? Because I put together a working group proposal over a year ago, and I presented it to Shan, the executive director, as well, the new executive director. I don't know whatever happened to that, but it sounds like the open source committee is kind of like the working group concept, or
It might be.
I added you to a
need
channel, by the way, too.
Yeah.
So you can see the doc.
Yeah. Send it to me. It might be. I need to read more into that. That is something I'm actually going to be getting coffee or drinks with Adarsh sometime within the next probably couple of weeks. Admittedly, we have kind of had a, oh, hey, we should meet. And then we kind of miss each other barely
do that with
because
him all
one
the
or both
time.
of us get busy because life happens sometimes. But no, I plan to pick his brain on a lot of stuff. I'm also getting some meetings with some other associations across Python, Rust, other communities to say, hey, admittedly, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm new to this. How exactly do I represent the community? What should I be paying attention to? How exactly should I be driving things forward? And what does that look like in your communities? Then trying to learn from that, trying to learn from the community, trying to learn from people who've been in the role before, like Adarsh or Fable or some of these other folks, is they have a lot of knowledge, a lot of context, a lot of valuable wisdom that I can learn from. And again, as I said earlier, I'm not nearly young enough to know everything anymore. So I have a lot to learn and a lot to catch up on.
Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate you.
Okay,
I don't
one
know if we
more
yeah,
maybe, and then
hers
we
is
need to wrap it up.
Really, really short final question. This is a good final question for you.
It's
What are your, now that you've been in the role for 2 months, what are your overall impressions so far? And obviously you can keep this generalized. You can keep this generalized, obviously, but like, I don't know, like surprised in a positive, like, what's your overall impression? Is it what you expected stepping into the role, or have you come to any interesting realizations that like would have surprised you from the outside?
I think there's a lot of complexity in roles like this that we kind of paper over, and very frequently people say it's not a very thankful job, is that you're going to be doing a lot of work. Not a lot of people are going to know when it goes right, but they'll definitely know when it goes wrong. So we kind of saw that earlier with everything that happened last year. That said, I still think it's a necessary role to play, is that sometimes we have to kind of take heat and be held to account for some things. I'm not sure what exactly that looks like, but what I think really matters here is that it is a hard job. There's a lot to do. There's 1,000 things to do, and you only have time for 10 of them. So what are the ones that you're going to pick? How exactly are you going to prioritize them? How do we manage to get that funneled through all the people who are very busy, who have no time to do anything? And then how exactly do we drive outcomes for the community inside of that, make sure to represent them, listen to them, learn from them, and go forward from there? And again, I don't have a lot of answers to that right now, but those are things I hope to learn. So if people have opinions of me, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn, Blue Sky, whatever. I lose track of what social networks I'm on nowadays because they keep on changing every 2 or 3 years. But, you know, feel free to reach out to me wherever, and then we can talk. Maybe if you're around town, we can grab drinks, coffee, something else like that, and we can kind of go from there.
let's not talk about you.
We'll get coffee later sometime. We'll get both of you out sometime.
Sure.
Well, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there. Again, we're going to be over at Pagan Idol. If someone could post the physical address there for people who are not on Google or Apple Maps, that would be appreciated. And we'll kind of go from there. But no, thank you for all your time.